Hello, my dear students. In today's class, we'll be starting with a new chapter, and that is nucleus. We have already discussed Rutherford's alpha particle scattering experiment, right? And in that experiment, we have seen that the mass of the atom is concentrated within small positively charged region, and this small positively charged region was named as Rutherford as nucleus. Now, what is the radius of this nucleus? So we will assume that the nucleus is a spherical region and whose radius is given by r is equal to r naught a power 1 by 3, where a is called the mass number. Now we'll discuss what is mass number now. That means r is directly proportional to a power 1 by 3. Okay, and this r naught is a constant, and the value of r naught is 1.2 femtometer. The value of R naught is 1.2 femtometer, and that is 1.2 into 10 raised to the power minus 15 meter. Okay. Now then what will be the volume of this nucleus? The volume of the nucleus will be 4 by 3 pi r cube. Now R is proportional to a power 1 by 3. So volume is proportional to r cube. That means volume is proportional to a. Okay. So A is proportional to R cube, where A is again the mass number. Now mass number is also called nucleon number. Now what is nucleon number or what is mass number? We'll discuss it now. Now what are the constituents of a nucleus? A nucleus comprises of mostly two elementary particles, and that is a neutron and proton. Neutrons are neutral particle. It is not deflected by electric and magnetic field. It was discovered by James Chadwick. Collectively, the neutrons and protons are called nucleons. So nucleons are basically the collection of neutrons and protons inside the nucleus. Okay, and this is actually the total number of neutrons and protons is the mass number. Okay, so which is represented by A. Now, protons are positively charged particle whose charge is same as the charge of electron, but obviously with a positive sign, and its mass is approximately 1839 times more than the mass of electron. So it is very massive compared to an electron, but its charge is same as the charge of electron. Okay. Now, proton was discovered by Goldstein. Right. Now, neutron has a mass of 1.6749286 into 10 raised to power minus 27 kg. Now, this is a very small unit, right? In this chapter, we'll mostly deal with one more quantity or one more unit of mass, and that is the atomic mass unit. Okay. First, what is the mass of the proton? The mass of the proton is 1.6726231 into 10 raised to power minus 27 kg. Now, this proton mass is slightly less than the mass of the neutron. Okay. So, now we will define what is atomic mass unit. What is 1 AMU? 1 AMU is defined as 1 by 12th or 1/12th of the mass of one atom of C12 isotope of carbon, which is at rest and in ground state. So that means 1 AMU, or you can say mass of carbon atom C612 is 1 AMU, and sometimes this AMU is also written as mu. Mu means AMU. Okay. Now 1 AMU in terms of kg is 1.6603 into 10 raised to the power minus 27 kg. Right. Okay. Now mass of neutron is slightly greater than the mass of proton is slightly greater than 1 AMU. Okay. So now what will be the mass of proton in terms of AMU? The mass of proton in terms of AMU will be 1.00742 AMU or mu, and mass of neutron will be 1.00881 AMU or mu. But one more important thing here is, in this chapter we'll discuss one more way of representing mass. See, by Einstein's mass energy relation, you know that E is equal to mc square. So sometimes mass will also be written as energy upon c square, where we will write this energy in mega electron volt. Okay, it's not necessary, but mostly the energy remains in mega electron volt. So we'll write this energy in mega electron volt. So that means 1 AMU, when you calculate the value of 1 AMU, you will get 1 AMU is 931.5 mega electron volt per c square. So this, in this chapter we will use mostly this term. One atomic mass unit represents 931.5 mega electron volt energy per c square. Okay, so now 1 AMU is 931.5 mega electron volt per c square. Then what will be the mass of the proton in terms of mega electron volt per c square? So the mass of the proton will be 938.4 mega electron volt per c square. What I have done here is I have just multiplied 931.5 with this, and we have got this. Okay, similarly, the mass of neutron will be 939.7 mega electron volt per c square. Okay, so this I have written the value here. It is 931.478. I have approximated it to 931.5. All right. Now, what is the representation of a nucleus? Now, nucleus can be represented in some books. It's like this: XZA. Okay, XZA. Now, what is this Z? Z is the proton number, and this is also called the atomic number. Atomic number. Okay, so the periodic table is filled according to the proton number or the atomic number. Okay, X is the symbol of the atom, Z is the atomic number, and that is equal to the number of protons, and A is the mass number, and that is the total number of nucleons, that is total number of protons plus total number of neutrons. So this is A is nothing but mass number, and this is also called nuclear number, and this is total number of nucleons. So you can write A is equal to Z plus N. Now look at this simple question. They are asking you what is the ratio of the radii of the nuclei Al 1327 and tellurium 52-125. Okay, so now you know that the radius is proportional to atomic mass number power 1 by 3, right? So now radius R1 by R2 will be equal to 27 by 125 whole power 1 by 3. This can be written as 27 power 1 by 3 is 3 and 125 power 1 by 3 is 5. So the radius ratio will be 6:10, right? Now let us look at this question. The radius of the zinc 3064 nucleus is nearly equal to. So now you know that radius is R0 into A power 1 by 3, where R0 is 1.2 femtometer. So I'll write 1.2 into A is 64 and 64 power 1 by 3. So A to 64 means 2 power 6, right? So this will be equal to 2.4 femtometer. In this question, they are asking you how many electrons, protons and neutrons are there in a nucleus of atomic number 11 and mass number 24. So this is a very simple question. The atomic number is nothing but the proton number. So the proton number is 11. So the number of protons is 11. So if the number of protons is 11, then the number of electrons are also 11, because the atom as a whole is electrically neutral. And we know that the number of neutrons is equal to A minus Z. In this case, the mass number, that is the value of A, is given as 24. So you will write this is 24 minus Z, that is 11. So from this we will get 13. So you will write electrons are 11, protons are 11 and neutrons are 13. Right? So answer will be B. Let us discuss some definitions. The first definition is, what is an isotope? The nuclei having same number of protons So the proton numbers are same, but the mass number or the neutron number are different. Then such nucleus are called isotopes. So for example, C612 and C614, these two are isotopes. 1H1, 1H2, 1H3. So here this three are isotopes because the proton number or the atomic number is same. Neon 1020, neon 1022. These are isotopes. Now isotopes have same proton number, right? So they occupy the same position in the periodic table. The physical and chemical properties of the isotopes does not vary much. Now next definition is isobar. Those set of nuclei containing same mass number but different atomic number are known as isobars. For example, C614 and N714. You can clearly see that now the element is changing, right? In isotopes, the element does not change. So here, the properties of both are not same. They occupy different positions in the periodic table. Okay, so isobars, in isobars what is happening is they are having the same mass number. There's one more example here, S40, Cl40, Ar40, K40, Ca40. Now out of this only Ca40 is the most stable. No two stable nucleus have same mass number. No two stable nucleus have same mass number. Okay, now the next definition is isotones. Now what are isotones? Those set of nuclei containing same number of neutrons are known as isotones. So in isotones, as the name suggests, the number of neutrons has to be same. Okay, example C614 and O816. So here you will see that the number of neutrons here is 14 minus 6 and here it is 16 minus 8. In both cases the number of neutrons is 8. Here S1636, Cl1737, Ar1838, K1939, Ca2040, all these have the neutron number of 20. You can subtract it to get the neutron number, right? So isotones have the same neutron number. They are not the same elements, so they occupy different position in the periodic table and they have different physical and chemical properties. Now the next definition is what is a mirror nuclei. The nuclei having same mass number but proton and neutron numbers interchanged. So a nuclei which have, or two nuclei, if they have same mass number but the proton and neutron number have interchanged, is called mirror nuclei, right? So example are, so beryllium 47 and lithium 37. From this you will see that the mass number of both are same, but here the proton number is 4 and here the proton number is 3, but here the neutron number is 3 and here the neutron number is 4. So the proton and neutron are interchanging, right? So this is the mirror nuclei. Mirror nuclei also occupy different positions in the periodic table and they have different physical and chemical properties, but mirror nuclei have similar values of binding energy. Now what is this? We will discuss a bit later when we discuss the definition of binding energy. Now the next thing that we have to discuss is what is the radius of atom compared to the radius of nucleus. This we have discussed already in Rutherford model. The radius of the atom is 10 raised to power 5 times the radius of nucleus, or you can say volume of the atom is 10 raised to power 15 times the volume of the nucleus. That means huge space inside atoms are empty and nucleus occupy only a tiny space there. Okay, now what is the density of a nucleus? Now you know that the nucleus is highly dense, right? Because entire mass of the atom, almost the entire mass of the atom is concentrated in a very small radius, right? So that now the density is mass by volume, right? Now mass of the nucleus will be equal to, now you know that the nucleus comprises of protons and neutrons, but protons and neutrons both are almost of same mass. So I can write both are of same mass and let us say MP, right? So the total number of nucleons, suppose of any nucleus is A, then the total mass of the nucleus will be AMP. Now this is approximate because neutrons and protons have slightly different values of mass, but we are assuming that they have same mass because the difference is very small. So the density is AMP divided by 4 by 3 pi r cube, right? Mass by volume. R is the radius. Now you know that radius is r naught a power 1 by 3. So r cube will be equal to r naught cube a, right? So just we can write here r naught cube a. Now when you see here, you will see that this a and this a gets cancelled out. Now if the a gets cancelled out, that means density is independent of the mass number. Now when you see this, you will see that all these terms are constants. Mass of proton is a constant, r naught is a constant, so the density will come out to be constant, and the value that will come out, it is 2.3 into 10 raised to power 17 kg per meter cube. So this is the density of the nucleus. Now you can see from this value that the density of nucleus is very high. Now if you have 1 meter cube of nucleus, the mass will be a staggering 2.3 into 10 raised to power 17 kg. Okay, now you have to remember, again I'm telling you, the density of a nucleus is independent of mass number, proton number or neutron number, anything. It is independent of the mass number, proton number or neutron number. That means density of all nucleus is almost same, whatever be the element, right? So density is of the order of 10 raised to power 17 kg per meter cube for almost all nuclei. Now nuclear density is independent of its mass number. We have already discussed. So in this question, they are asking you calculate the electric potential energy of interaction due to the electric repulsion between two nuclei of C12 when they touch each other. So the two nuclei of C12 are touching each other. So the radius of a C12 nucleus is R is equal to R naught a power 1 by 3. We know that. And we can say in some books actually they write 1.1 femtometer, in some books they write 1.2 femtometer. Actually in exam whenever it will come, they will give you the value of R naught, right? So 1.1 femtometer multiplied by 12 power 1 by 3, and that will come out to be 2.52 femtometer. So the radius of a C12 nucleus is approximately 2.52 femtometer. Now the separation between the centers of the nucleus is 2r. Separation between the centers of the nucleus is 2r, and 2r will be 5.04 femtometer. Just double it. Then you know that the potential energy formula between two charges is kq1 q2 by r, right? Now q1 is what? Q1 is 6 into 1.6 into 10 raised to power minus 19. Why? Because there are 6 protons, right? The charge of one proton is this. Q2 is also total 6 in number, right? So the total value of Q1 will be 6 into 1.6 into 10 raised to power minus 19, and the value of Q2 will be minus same value. Okay, so that means it will become a square divided by 4 pi epsilon naught. Now 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught is 9 into 10 raised to power 9, right? And the value of R is 5. This value of R is from here 5.04 into 10 raised to power minus 15. Okay, 1 femtometer is 10 raised to power minus 15. So from this you will get the potential energy is approximately 1.64 into 10 raised to power minus 12 joule. Now 1.64 into 10 raised to power minus 12 joule can be written as 10.2 mega electron volt. You know that 1 electron volt is, or you can say 1 joule is 1 by 1.6 into 10 raised to the power minus 19 electron volt. Now the next question is nuclear radius of O816 is this. Then find the density of the nuclear matter. Now you know that the density of nucleus is same for all the nucleus. So if the options are not very close, then you can directly say the answer will be approximately 2.3 into 10 raised to power 17 kg per meter cube. Now we will discuss the properties of neutrons. Neutrons are electrically neutral particle. That means they are not deflected by electric and magnetic field. Why? Because neutrons, being chargeless, cannot experience electric and magnetic force due to the electric field and magnetic field respectively. Second important point is neutrons do not ionize the gases. Now what does this mean is it cannot eject electrons from the atomic orbit, right? So the neutron has very less ionizing power. It has very less ionizing power. But the most important thing about neutrons is that it has a high penetrating power. Now, what do you mean by high penetrating power? So, whenever a neutron strikes the atom, whenever a neutron strikes the atom, it penetrates inside the atom, and this important property is exploited in a nuclear fission. Why? Because in a nuclear fission, the colliding particle has to strike the nucleus. Now, to strike the nucleus, it has to penetrate inside the atom. The neutrons have a very high penetrating power. But the neutrons are actually unstable particles in free state. Now, neutrons has a half-life of 17 minutes. But when it enters inside a nucleus, it becomes a stable particle. So free neutrons are unstable with a half-life of 17 minutes. That means in 17 minutes, the concentration of nucleus will become half. The next important definition that we will discuss is mass defect. Actually, from this part, the real chapter is starting. Till now, we have discussed only some definitions, right? So now you listen carefully. Now, when protons and neutrons combine together to form a nucleus. So you have some protons, you have some neutrons, and they combine together to form a nucleus. Then in this process, some mass gets lost, right? And this lost mass is called the mass defect. So what I'm saying here is, suppose you have Z protons and N neutrons, right? Then the total mass should be Z into mass of proton plus N into mass of neutron, right? But now this is combined into a nucleus, right? Suppose this mass is X. Then when this is combined into a nucleus, then you have Z protons and N neutrons inside the nucleus. The mass that is observed is not actually X, but it comes out to be Y. That means the mass has changed, and in fact it is observed that the mass has decreased. So whenever individual nucleons combine together to form a nucleus, mass decreases. This concept or this phenomena is called mass defect. So the expected mass was Z into mass of proton plus A minus Z into mass of neutron. What is this A minus Z? Now you know that Z plus N is A. So instead of N, we have written A minus Z. Okay. Now what is the observed mass? The observed mass is the mass of the nucleus. So this I am writing the mass of the nucleus. But yes, mass of the nucleus can be written as mass of the atom minus Z times the mass of electron, because atoms consist of nucleus and electron, right? So mass of atom is equal to mass of nucleus plus mass of electron, right? So mass of atom is equal to mass of nucleus plus mass of electron. So mass of nucleus can be written as mass of atom minus the mass of electron. So that is why we have written mass observed is the mass of nucleus, and that is mass of atom minus mass of electron. Because there are Z protons, so definitely there will be Z electrons, right? So it is found that the observed mass is less than the expected mass. Expected mass means the mass you were expecting because it had Z protons and N neutrons. Okay. Now this mass defect is M expected minus M observed. So if you subtract this, you will get delta M is equal to Z MP plus A minus Z Mn minus the mass of nucleus. Now mass of nucleus again can be written as mass of atom minus ZME. Okay, I'm just writing the mass of nucleus here. So this is the mass defect. So mass defect is the expected mass minus the observed mass. The observed mass is always less than the expected mass. In fact, more the mass defect, more is the stability of the nucleus. So a nucleus wants more mass defect so that it become more stable. Now, how is this possible? This is actually, by Einstein's mass energy relation, mass and energy are interconvertible. Mass can be converted into energy. So, whenever the mass defect is high, that means that mass has converted to energy. Now, more the energy released, more is the stability. That is why if mass defect is high, that means more energy is released. More energy is released, that means more is the stability. Okay, now delta m means mass defect is represented by delta m. So delta m is can also be written like this: delta m is mass of nucleons minus mass of nucleus. Okay, so mass of nucleons is A minus mass of nucleus is suppose m. So delta m can also be written like this: mass of nucleons minus the mass of nucleus. There is one more term called packing fraction. So packing fraction is defined as mass defect per nucleons. Now what is mass defect? Mass defect, now only we discussed, the mass defect is A minus M, right? So the mass defect is A minus M divided by the number of nucleons, that is A. Okay, so you know that actually it should be A minus M here, right? Now A is what? A is ZMP plus NMN, right? And M is the mass of nucleus. So A minus M divided by A. More the negative value of packing fraction, more is the stability of the product nuclei. So this is actually the magnitude, and packing fraction is defined as the negative of this. Okay, more negative the value of the packing fraction, more is the stability of the product nuclei, because more the energy will be released. We have already discussed. Okay, now we will discuss what is binding energy. Now, binding energy is defined as the minimum energy required to break the nucleus into its constituent particles and separate them up to infinity. So, binding energy means you have to break the nucleus, because you know that whenever neutrons come together and they form a nucleus, it increases its stability, right? Now, to to break the nucleus again, you will have to give some energy. So the energy that you have to give to break the nucleus into its constituent nucleons is called binding energy. So again, I'll repeat. What is binding energy? It is the minimum energy which is required to break this nucleus into its constituent nucleons, or the amount of energy released when nucleons from infinity, they were separated initially, now it comes together to form a nucleus. So why is this energy getting released? This energy is getting released because the mass is decreased. Now the mass is getting converted to energy according to Einstein's mass energy relation, that is E is equal to delta M multiplied by C square. So the mass is getting converted to energy when a nucleus is formed. Okay. Now in nucleus, proton and neutrons are contained in very small sphere of radius of the order of 10 raised to the power minus 15 meter. So we already know that the nucleus size or nucleus radius is of the order of 1 femtometer, right? So in this small space, there are a lot of neutrons, protons, right? So at such small distance, two protons exert a very large force of repulsion on each other. The two protons exert very large electrostatic force of repulsion. Now, even though there is such large repulsion, still the nucleus is more stable. Why? Because of some forces, some strong force, and that is called strong nuclear force, that we'll be discussing later. Okay, so therefore certain amount of energy needed to bind the nucleus, and this amount of energy or this energy is called the binding energy, because to overcome this repulsion you need some binding energy, right? So when the nucleus is formed, the mass decreases, right? The mass defect supplies the required binding energy. The mass defect through this relation supplies the required binding energy, or the energy equivalent to mass defect is called the binding energy. That is what we are discussing. The energy equivalent to the mass defect is called the binding energy. So by Einstein's mass energy relation, binding energy is mass defect into velocity of light whole square. So the mass defect is we have already calculated, right? Now, once you have calculated the mass defect, you actually can calculate the binding energy. So binding energy is mass defect, and we will write the mass defect in AMU or in the atomic mass unit. So mass defect is delta M in AMU into C square. And we also know that 1 AMU into C square is 931.5 mega electron volt. Okay, we have discussed 1 AMU multiplied by C square is 931.5 mega electron volt, or you can say 1 AMU is 931.5 mega electron volt per C square, right? So 1 AMU multiplied by C square is 931.5 mega electron volt. So binding energy can also be written as delta M in AMU multiplied by 931.5 mega electron volt. Okay, so now the binding energy of a nucleus may also be defined as the amount of work required to separate the nucleons at infinite distance, that we have already discussed. The amount of work we have to do so that the nucleons which are inside the nucleus has to be means this, the constituents of this nucleus has to be now taken to infinity. That means this nucleus has to be broken. Okay, the amount of work that you have to do to break this nucleus and separate it up to infinity is called the binding energy, right? Then there is one more term called binding energy per nucleon. The binding energy per nucleon actually is a measure of stability. More the binding energy per nucleon, more is the stability. So the binding energy per nucleon is the measure of stability of nucleus. Greater the binding energy per nucleon, greater will be the nuclear stability. Now, if the mass equivalent to one mass of a proton is completely converted into energy, then determine the energy produced. So you know that mass and energy are interconvertible according to the relation E is equal to mc square. Now what they are asking in this question is, if the mass of the proton, if mass of whole proton is completely converted into energy, then what is the energy produced? Now you know that the mass of proton is approximately 1 AMU, right? So 1 AMU into C square, when you do, you will get something 1.49 into 10 raised to the power minus 10 joule. Okay, now you convert it into mega electron volt, you will get 931.5 mega electron volt. So 1 AMU is approximately equal to 931.5 mega electron volt, right? Here we have assumed that the mass of proton is nearly equal to 1 AMU, but you know that the mass of proton is slightly greater than 1 AMU, and in that case this answer will come out to be 938 mega electron volt approximately, right? So here this is very important. If the mass equivalent of one electron is completely converted into energy, then determine the energy liberated. Now you know that the mass of this electron is 9.1 into 10 raised to the power minus 31 kg, right? So you will get the answer in joules. Convert this into mega electron volt, you will get 0.511 mega electron volt. So the energy equivalent of an electron is 0.511 mega electron volt. That means if all this energy, means all this mass is converted into energy, in that case the energy released will be 0.511 mega electron volt. If the mass defect in the formation of helium from hydrogen is 0.5%, then the energy obtained in kilowatt hour in forming helium from 1 kg of hydrogen will be. Okay, so what they are saying is, in this question, if the mass defect is 0.5%, that means the mass has changed by 0.5%. That means delta M is equal to 0.5 divided by 100 into 1. Okay, so that will be equal to 0.005 kg. So this is the mass defect. Now once you get the value of mass defect, the energy released will be delta M multiplied by C square. Okay, so this is the energy released, and this will come out to be 4.5 into 10 raised to the power 14 joule. Okay, and 1 joule is basically watt into second, right? So 4.5 into 10 raised to the power 14 joule is the energy that is released when 1 kg of hydrogen makes a helium. Okay, now they are asking you the answer in kilowatt hour. So you have to convert this joule into kilowatt hour. Okay. Now what you have to do is, because watt joule is watt into second, you have to convert it into watt into hour, and then you have to divide it by 1000 further, right? In that case you will get kilowatt hour. So when you first make it watt hour, you just have to divide it by 60 into 60. Then you have to further divide by 1000 to get kilowatt hour. So the answer that will come out is 1.25 into 10 raised to the power 8 kilowatt hour. In the next question, what they are saying is the binding energy per nucleon of an alpha particle. So they are asking you the binding energy per nucleon for He24, helium nucleus. Alpha particle means doubly ionized helium, that is helium nucleus. For that they have given you some information, and that is mass of the helium nucleus is something AMU, mass of the proton is something AMU, and mass of the neutron is something AMU, right? So now we have to find the binding energy of He2 plus, right? So first, you know that binding energy is delta m into c square. So first we have to find delta m, right? Now delta m is z into mp, z into mp plus a minus z into mn. Delta m is z into mp plus a minus z into mn. So this is the original mass minus the mass of nucleus, right? So they've given you the mass of helium nucleus, they've given you the mass of proton, they've given you the mass of neutron. So first we will find the value of delta m, right? So from this you can see that the value of z is 2 and the value of n is also 2. Why? Because a is 4, a minus z is 2, right? So 2 into mass of proton. Mass of proton is 1.007277 plus A minus Z is 2 into mass of neutron is 1.00866 minus the mass of nucleus. The mass of nucleus is 4.001265. So this is the mass defect. Now the binding energy is nothing but mass defect multiplied by c square, right? So the mass defect that we will see from here is 0.030621, and this is in AMU. Now 1 AMU into c square can be written as 931.5 mega electron volt. So from this you will get the binding energy is approximately 28.52 mega electron volt. But they've asked you the binding energy per nucleon. Remember, they've asked you the binding energy per nucleon, because the binding energy per nucleon is the measure of stability, not the binding energy. Why? Because as the atomic number increases, the binding energy increases, but it is not necessary that the stability increases. The binding energy per nucleon, how much binding energy is there for one nucleon, decides the stability. Okay, so binding energy per nucleon for helium is 28.52 divided by 4, and that will come out to be 7.10525. So this is the binding energy per nucleon of helium nucleus. So the stability is decided not by the binding energy but by the binding energy per nucleon. For one nucleon, if there is more binding energy, then you will say that nucleus is more stable. Now, from this following data, find the order of stability. Okay, so you are given three nucleus. The first is p, second is q, third is r. The atomic mass number of each of them is given and the binding energy is given. But you know that stability is decided not by the binding energy but by the binding energy per nucleon. See, this has more mass number, this has more binding energy, but this is not necessarily more stable. See, here the binding energy is per nucleon is 10. Here the binding energy per nucleon is 12. Here the binding energy per nucleon is 11. So that means Q is the most stable, then R, and then P. In fact, P is the least stable here even though it has more binding energy. So binding energy is not a deciding factor for stability, but binding energy per nucleon is the deciding factor for stability. Now, a nucleus has a binding energy of 100 mega electron volt. So a nucleus current nucleus is having a binding energy of 100 mega electron volt. Now due to some process, it further releases 10 mega electron volt of energy. So if it has a binding energy of 100 mega electron volt, that means what? That means whenever the nucleus is formed, 100 mega electron volt energy is released. Now if it further releases 10 mega electron volt of energy, that means it has now become more stable. So the new binding energy will become 110 mega electron volt. Why? Because it will now release 110 mega electron volt. It will become more stable. Okay, so the answer will be 110 mega electron volt. Now in this question, calculate the binding energy of an alpha particle. So this is the same question that we have already discussed, but this time instead of mass of proton, they've given you the mass of hydrogen atom. And instead of the mass of nucleus of helium, they have given you the mass of helium atom. Okay, so I'll tell you what to do in this case. So I'll tell you, see, this is very important. You can write it in delta M formula also. Delta M is equal to, we have seen ZMP plus A minus ZMN minus mass of nucleus. But most of the time they will not give you the mass of nucleus, but they will give you the mass of the atom, like in this case. So in that case, what will you say? See, delta M is equal to Z into MP plus A minus Z into Mn minus the mass of nucleus can be written as mass of atom minus Z into mass of electron. Because if the atomic number is Z, it will have Z protons and Z electrons, because an atom as a whole is electrically neutral. So if it has Z electron, then the mass of the nucleus will be the mass of atom minus the mass of electrons. Now electrons are in total Z number, right? So you will say mass of atom minus the mass of electrons, that is Z into mass of one electron, is the mass of nucleus. So delta M will be equal to Z common Mp plus Me plus A minus Z into mass of Mn minus the mass of atom. Now Mp plus Me, now one proton and one electron combines to form hydrogen atom. So that is why they have not given you the mass of proton, but they have given you the mass of hydrogen atom, right? So delta M is Z into mass of hydrogen atom plus A minus Z into mass of neutron minus the mass of the atom. So this is delta M when they give you the mass of atom instead of the mass of nucleus, and they give you the mass of hydrogen atom instead of the mass of proton. Okay. Now once you get this delta M, just you have to put the values. So Z is 2, mass of hydrogen atom is given to you as 1.007826. So we will write here 1.007826 plus A minus Z is also 2 into mass of neutron is 1.00, I think 1.008665. So we'll write 1.008665 minus the mass of helium atom. The mass of helium atom is 4.00260. So we'll write mass of helium atom is 4.00260. So once you get the value of delta M, the binding energy is delta M multiplied by C square. And in this case, they have asked the binding energy only, not the binding energy per nucleon, and you will get 28.3 mega electron volt approximately. Now in this question, they've asked you the binding energy of iron nucleus, that is Fe2656. The atomic mass of iron is given to you. The atomic mass of hydrogen is given to you, and the mass of neutron is given to you. So again, they have given you the mass of atom. Here you can see that you have 26 number of protons and 56 minus 26, that is 30 number of neutrons. So you will write binding energy is 26 multiplied by the mass of hydrogen atom, plus 30, that is the neutron number, multiplied by the mass of neutron minus the mass of atom multiplied by C square. So you'll get, this is the mass defect multiplied by C square. But you know that 1 AMU into C square is approximately 931. You can write 931.5 also. So 931.5 mega electron volt, right? So from this you will get the binding energy is 492 mega electron volt. But they can also ask you the binding energy per nucleon. So this time the binding energy per nucleon Nucleon means the nucleon number, right? Total number of nucleons is A. So binding energy per nucleon is equal to 492 divided by 56. And this will come out to be nearly equal to 8.8 mega electron volt. So the binding energy of iron nucleus is 8.8 mega electron volt per nucleon. In fact, this is the highest binding energy per nucleon. This is the highest binding energy per nucleon. That means nucleus of iron is the most stable available nucleus. Okay, now a nuclear reaction is given by A plus B gives C plus D. They have given you the binding energies of A, B, C, D. Okay, then find the energy released in this reaction. Now this is the theory part, and you have to understand this very carefully, because what happens in a nuclear reaction, how much energy is released in a nuclear reaction is different from how much energy is released in a chemical reaction. In a nuclear reaction, the energy is released because of the loss in mass. Okay, in a chemical reaction, the energy is not released because of the loss in mass. So here the energy released in a nuclear reaction is called Q value. Now how much energy is released is given by Q is equal to mass of reactant nucleus minus the mass of product nucleus multiplied by C square. Mass of reactant minus mass of product, because the mass has to decrease, right? From here to here, if the mass decreases, that means the energy is getting released. Okay, this is one way of writing. The other way of writing is Q is equal to, now if this mass is more and this mass is less, that means in the product the mass defect is more, right? More stability means what? More the mass defect. So in C and D, or in the product, the mass defect is more. That is why they are more stable. Okay, so you will write it like this also. This is also defined as mass defect of product minus the mass defect of reactant nucleus into C square. Okay, when you write the mass, then you will write the mass of reactant nucleus first and mass of product nucleus later. But when you write the mass defect, then the mass defect of product first you will write. Okay, because the product nucleus has less mass, that means it has more mass defect. Now mass defect multiplied by C square is nothing but the binding energy. So you will say that this is equal to binding energy of product minus the binding energy of the reactant. Okay, now they have given you, in this case, the binding energy of A, B, C, D as B1, B2, B3 and B4. So the binding energy of product is B3 plus B4 and the binding energy of reactant is B1 plus B2. So what is the energy released in this reaction? The energy released in this reaction is B3 plus B4 minus B1 plus B2. So this is the energy released in this reaction. Now we will discuss the variation of binding energy per nucleon with mass number. Now we know what is binding energy per nucleon. Binding energy per nucleon is binding energy divided by the number of nucleon. And we know that more the binding energy per nucleon, more is the stability, right? Now as the mass number increases, it is observed that first the binding energy increases, then it reaches a maximum value and then it again decreases. Okay, so the binding energy per nucleon first increases on an average. On an average, why we are writing? Because there are some exceptions here. The binding energy of helium is more than lithium, although its atomic mass number is less. Similarly, the binding energy of carbon is more than nitrogen. So there are some exceptions, but overall the trend is same. So the binding energy per nucleon first increases on an average, reaches a maximum value of about 8.7 to 8.8 mega electron volt, and this range is for elements between mass number 50 to 80. Okay, and after that it starts to decrease. So for still heavier nuclei, the binding energy per nucleon slowly decreases as A increases. So first it sharply increases and then it slowly decreases. The binding energy per nucleon is maximum for iron nucleus. So the iron nucleus is the most stable nucleus because the binding energy per nucleon is maximum, not the binding energy. Binding energy per nucleon is a measure of stability. Okay. Now the binding energy per nucleon for iron nucleus is 8.8 mega electron volt. Right. The binding energy per nucleon is more for medium level nuclei than the smaller or the larger nuclei. The most stable nuclei are the medium level nuclei. Okay. So for A belonging to 30 to 170, the nucleus are tightly bound then compared to the nucleus which are less than 30 or which are greater than 170. Okay, so again I'll repeat this curve. What does this curve shows? This curve, that is binding energy per nucleon in mega electron volt versus the number of nucleon or the atomic mass number. It shows that first the binding energy per nucleon increases, it attains a maximum value in iron, and then it starts to decrease. The average binding energy per nucleon for medium to heavy nucleus is 8 mega electron volt. Okay, now lighter nuclei, every nucleus wants to become stable, right? So lighter nuclei, if they get a chance, they will try to fuse with some other lighter nuclei to form a heavier nuclei or the mid-level nuclei. Every nucleus wants to become like a mid-level nuclei. This process is called the fusion. When light nuclei come together and fuse to form a heavier nuclei, the reaction means this process is called fusion. Okay, and in this process energy is getting released because they are getting more stable. Similarly, a nucleus which divides into fragments undergoes a process which is called fission. Now a nucleus may be unstable in its ground state. Nucleus also has excited states just like atoms, but in atoms, in ground state the atom is stable, but a nucleus may not be stable. All nucleuses are not stable. Those nucleus which are unstable undergo radioactive decay. Okay, the heaviest stable nucleus is bismuth 83209. The half-life of bismuth is greater than 2 into 10 raised power 16 years. Okay, we can also write the heaviest stable nuclei is actually lead 82. Why? Because lead 82 does not undergo any decay. Bismuth undergoes some decay, but its decay constant or its half-life is very large. Okay, so we will say that all nucleus with Z greater than 83 are unstable. The last stable nucleus is bismuth, and after that all other nucleus are unstable. Okay, now stable nucleus, that is the mid-level nucleus, have N by Z ratio approximately between 1.3 to 1.4. That means there are slightly more number of neutrons than protons inside a nucleus to keep it more stable. The N by Z ratio is approximately between 1.3 to 1.4. Now the nuclei with even number of nucleons, even Z, so even number of nucleons and even number of protons, are usually stable and most abundant. The nuclei with odd A and odd Z are unstable in general. This is a general rule, but there can be some exceptions. Nuclei with odd Z and even A are also unstable with some exceptions. So what you have to remember is nucleus with even A and even Z are usually stable. The nuclei with odd A and odd Z are unstable. And nuclei with odd Z but even A are unstable, but there are some exceptions like 1H2, Li36. Okay, so these are some of the exceptions. Now again I'll repeat, the heavier nucleus, they are unstable, right? Because their binding energy per nucleon is low compared to the mid-level nuclei. They have the tendency to split into medium nuclei. This process is called fission. And the lighter nuclei have very low binding energy per nucleon. They want to fuse to form a larger or the mid-level nuclei, and this process is called fusion. Now we will discuss what is a nuclear force. Now we know that a nucleus is stable, but inside nucleus, which is a very small volume, there are large number of protons. Protons are positively charged particles, and they undergo repulsive forces because of the electrostatic repulsion. Now, even after the strong repulsive force, the electrostatic force is a strong force, and especially if the distance is very small, it becomes even more stronger. Then how the nucleus is stable even if there is a strong electrostatic repulsive force between protons which are present inside the nucleus? The reason is the nuclear force or the strong nuclear force. The strong nuclear force are force which helps to keep the nucleus bound together. In fact, it makes it more stable compared to the individual nucleons. So inside the nucleus, now we know that there are neutrons and protons, right? Now, let us discuss some properties of nuclear force. The nuclear force are basically attractive. Now we have written here basically attractive because it is attractive for some distance. So beyond that distance it is attractive, but if the distance between two nucleons become very small, then it might also become repulsive. Okay, and these nuclear forces are responsible for keeping the nucleons bound inside a nucleus in spite of the repulsion between the positively charged protons. It is the strongest force within nuclear dimensions. Now it is a short range force, but it is the strongest force in that short range. Okay, so it is a short range force and its range only lies up to femtometers. It acts only between neutron neutron, neutron proton and proton proton. So the nuclear force acts between a neutron and a neutron, a proton and a proton, and also a neutron and a proton. That means it does not depend on the charge because neutrons are chargeless, right? So the nuclear force does not depend on charge. In fact, it is same between a neutron and a neutron, it is same between a proton and a proton, and it is same between a neutron and a proton. Okay, so it does not depend on the nature of the nucleons and it also does not depend on the charge, right? Now, an important property of nuclear force is that it is not a central force. That means the force between the two nucleons is not determined solely by the distance between them. For example, the nuclear force depends on the direction of the spins of the nucleons. So you know that all the nucleons are spinning. They can be spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise. Okay. Now, if both nucleons are spinning clockwise, then the force for the same distance between them is larger compared to if both nucleons are moving in or rotating in or spinning in opposite direction. Okay, so the force is stronger if the spins of the nucleons are parallel, that is both the nucleons have same spin, and is weaker if the spins are anti-parallel, that is both have plus half or both have minus half. And this ms, that is plus half and minus half, is called the spin quantum number. Now let us again revisit what are the important points about nuclear force. So the first important point is they are strong force, right? The nuclear forces are strong force. Nuclear force is approximately 100 times the electrostatic force. So the nuclear force is the strongest of all the forces. The second important point that we have discussed is they are short range force. You can say that the nuclear force is active only up to femtometer dimensions, okay, or 10 raised to power minus 15 meter. The third important point is it can be attractive or repulsive. It can be attractive or repulsive. See, if we draw the graph of potential energy in the separation of the nucleons, you will see that for a particular value of R, that is R naught, there is equilibrium. This is called the equilibrium separation. And you know that force is minus du by dr. Now, if force is negative, you know that it is attractive force, right? Force is negative, it is attractive force. And if force is positive, then the force is repulsive force. So nuclear force can be attractive or repulsive depending on whether the force comes out to be negative or positive. See, the force is minus du by dr. So if the slope is positive, that means the force is negative. Here the slope is positive, that means the force is negative. So beyond R naught, you will say that the force is attractive. Okay, and for this region less than R naught, when the separation between two nucleons is less than R naught, in that case you will say that the force is repulsive. Why? Because the slope is negative. Negative means positive. The force positive means force is repulsive. So the value of R naught is approximately 0.7 femtometer. So if the distance is less than R naught or 0.7 femtometer, the force becomes repulsive. So nuclear force is not necessarily attractive. It can be repulsive also, depending on what is the separation between the two nucleons. Okay, but in nuclear dimensions, normally the distance between two nucleons is greater than the equilibrium separation. So in that case, what happens is, in that case, the nuclear force is attractive inside a nucleus. Okay. Then we have seen that the nuclear force is charge independent. In fact, it is nucleon independent. Whatever be the nucleon, we have seen that the force between two nucleons is same. Then we have seen that the force is non-conservative and non-central. Non-conservative means what? Means work done in a closed path may not be zero. Okay. So non-conservative, and it is also non-central. That means it does not only depend on the separation between the two nucleons. So much is not known about this force, how this force comes, how can it become attractive, sometimes repulsive, how is it charge dependent, much is not known about this, but we know that this force between two nucleons arises because of the exchange of some particles called meson particles. So this force arises because of exchange of pi meson particles between nucleons. So there is an exchange of certain particles between nucleons due to which this attraction or repulsion come, and these particles are pi meson particles. Okay. Now we will discuss the nuclear stability curve. The nuclear stability curve is a curve between the number of neutrons and the number of protons. We know that a nucleus is stable because of the strong nuclear force that is acting between the nucleons, even though there is a strong electrostatic repulsive force between the protons, right? So the nuclear stability curve says that for smaller nucleus that is up to calcium, N by Z ratio is almost equal to 1. That means the number of neutrons is equal to the number of protons. But as the mass number or as the proton number increases, that is for heavier nucleus, more number of neutrons are required to keep the nucleus stable. And why is this so? Why more number of neutrons are required? Because the neutrons are not enough to overcome the proton repulsion, that is the electrostatic repulsion. So that is why for heavier nucleus more neutrons are required to overcome the electrostatic repulsive force. Now the N by Z value should not be very high also, because you know that the space inside the nucleus is fixed. Now if the space inside the nucleus is fixed, that means the two nucleons cannot have a distance smaller than 0.7 femtometer. Why? Because you know that for less than 0.7 femtometer distance, this is an approximate value, the force becomes repulsive. Now you do not want the nuclear force to become repulsive, because the nuclear force is supposed to be attractive. Only then the nucleus can remain stable. So that is why the value of N required is more than the number of protons. The N has to be more than Z for heavier nucleus, but it should not be excessively more. The highest value of N by Z that is found out is 1.6, but for most stable nucleus the N by Z ratio is somewhere between 1.3 to 1.4. Now for example, here for silver the number of protons is 47 and the number of neutrons is 107 minus 47, that is 60. Similarly for gold the atomic number is 79 and the mass number is 197, so the neutron number will be 197 minus 79, that is 118. So neutrons are slightly more than the number of protons for heavier nucleus. The points Z, N for stable nucleus falls in a rather well-defined narrow region. So this bold line here, this solid line here, so shows the stability curve. Now this is actually not a line but a region. Okay, it is a narrow region where the nucleus are supposed to be or assumed to be stable. Now if the nucleus lies inside this stability belt or the nuclear stability belt, then you will say that the nucleus is stable. Now there will be nucleus to the left of it, there will be nucleus to the right of it, but these nucleuses are unstable, right? Now the nucleus which are unstable, they undergo radioactive decay, okay, according to the laws of radioactive disintegration that we will discuss in the next class. All right, now all these nucleus which are unstable, what they want to do is they want to decay, and they decays up to the time or up to the point when they come inside this stability curve. Okay, now the nucleus which are to the left of this stability region, they have excess neutrons. Now you will say this side also have excess neutrons. Now excess neutrons does not mean more number of neutrons than number of protons. No, the excess neutrons means that the number of neutrons are more than what is required. Okay, similarly this side has excess proton. Now you will say that no, here the proton number is less than number of neutrons. Yes, here the proton number is less than the number of neutrons, but still you will say that this is excess proton. Now excess proton does not mean that more number of protons are there. Excess proton means that there are more protons than what is required. So the nucleus which are to the left of the stability belt are unstable because they have excess neutrons, and the nucleus which are to the right of the stability belt are unstable because they have excess protons. Again I will repeat, excess protons or excess neutrons does not mean that more number of neutrons. No, excess proton means more proton than what is required, and excess neutron again means more neutron than what is required. Okay, now these type of nucleus undergoes radioactive decay so that they can become a stable nucleus. How they perform the radioactive decay, we will discuss it in the next class. So in the next class we are going to discuss the laws of radioactive decay, how decay is occurring, why is the decay occurring. So we have discussed one point, why is the decay occurring, because they are unstable and they want to convert into a stable nucleus. But how is it doing, what are the particles it is emitting, that we will be discussing in the next class. So stay tuned for my next class.
If you like my video, do hit the like button and share my work with your friends, your juniors, your seniors, and any other student who is preparing for JEE, NEET, and any other competitive exam. Also, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever I upload my next video.